Hi, I thought I would do a video about the empowerment of ritual objects because these teachings, they're not given very often, at least I don't see them being given very often, and yet to me they seem to be absolutely essential if you're working in a shamanistic or an animistic way. So this is loosely based on an article that I wrote a few issues ago in Sacred Hoop magazine, and it's drawn from a variety of different traditions that I've worked with over the decades: Native American and Mongolian and Tibetan. And I'm going to try and look at the common factor in all of those different traditions so that it gives you some idea about ways that you can work to empower the ritual objects, the sacred objects that you're using in your practice. So, for a ritual object to become alive, it has to be worked with. It just has to have that blessing and awakening process. Otherwise, it's kind of only got a sort of half-life, perhaps, or no life at all. It's just a lump of kind of matter. Not saying that that matter isn't alive, but it's not dedicated. I think that's a pretty good way of putting it. It's not dedicated to the practice. Every ritual object has at least two different spirits. There's the spirit of that class of object. So, okay, think of a rattle. Think of a medicine rattle, a rawhide rattle or a gourd rattle. There's the spirit of that rattle, that individual rattle, and there's the spirit of all rattles, the spirit of rattleness, if you like. I always think of this as a little bit like with animals. Okay, I'm sitting in my office in the garden, and there's a cat that often walks past, a ginger tomcat, and there's the spirit of that ginger tomcat, and that's its individual spirit. But there's also what I think of as the spirit of catness, which is the spirit of all of the cats, the collective group soul, if you like. Every single one of them has this kind of networked group soul. You can say it with humans too. We sometimes talk about the sort of morphogenetic field of humans. So there's the spirit of humanness, and then there's the spirit of individual humans. And it's the same with that rattle. You've got a medicine rattle, it's in your hand, you're shaking it around. That's the spirit of that rattle, but it's connected to all of the others, because there are thousands and thousands and thousands of rattles, and there are rattles that have been used for thousands and thousands of years. So it's got a strong group soul. The more a ritual object is used by lots of different people across lots of different days, years, months, centuries, eons, the more that group soul gains power. It kind of gains an identity. It knows what it is because it's used in ritual. So a new rattle kind of tentatively taps into that a little bit, but it needs to be dedicated. It needs to be brought to be alive and awake. So I'm going to talk about a purba. This is the purba that I use in my practice. And I just like to hold something in my hand. It's a deep insecurity, you see, so it's good to actually have something here. This purba is made of, it's an iron blade, and it's got silver decoration on it, and I don't know how old it is. It's probably a couple of 100 years old, maybe. It came from Bhutan. A friend's mother brought it back from Bhutan, and when my friend's mother passed into spirit, this rattle, not a rattle, doesn't make a sound, this purba came to me. So purbas have been used for, I don't know, well over 1,000 years, probably well over 2,000 or 3,000 years. And so they've got a big collective soul. because they've been used in so many heavyweight ceremonies all over the Himalayas and in India too, where they originate from. And so a purba has this incredible body of collectiveness. But when you get a new purba, this obviously isn't new, but if I was to buy a new purba just straight out of the factory, and they still make them, and eBay and other places are awash with them, it's sort of a purba in waiting, because it needs to be empowered, it needs to be connected to its own spirit of purbaness. Now, a rattle doesn't have a kind of universal spirit, which is why I picked up the purba, because a purba does. A purba has a spirit called Dorji Purba in Tibetan, or Vajrakalaya in Sanskrit, and so that is the spirit of the purba. Rattles don't do that, because rattles will be used by different cultures, different tribal groups, and it's like every single particular lineage, group, medicine society, whatever, they will have their own particular kind of quality of rattleness. They will have their own rattle spirit, if you like. It's not as formalized as the Tibetans. That's why I thought it would be good to talk about this, because different cultures, different traditions, they'll work in different ways. But if I was working with a rattle, and it really doesn't make a sound if I shake it, you can tell that. Totally useless as a rattle. I'm going to put it down now. If you shake a rattle, and you're working with a rattle, maybe to call the spirits in and things like that, it needs to be empowered. It needs to be connected to the source, I guess is a good way of putting it. It needs to be connected to the center of the world, the center of creation. And I think I'll probably talk about that later on, because that's quite an important thing. And it also needs to be bonded with you. So you've got to kind of coax it to life. And there are lots of different ways to do this with different objects. Different objects, some of them will have very specific practices. Like, for instance, if I was going to empower a new purba, then I would have specific practices which are passed on, and they too, because they are a ceremony that has been performed lots and lots and lots of times over hundreds or thousands of years, the ceremony itself has a power, it has a spirit. And so when you're connecting into the ceremony and you're connecting into the ritual object too, you're kind of double charging it, and you're linking in. It's like you're making a kind of like a power connection. It's like these two plugs are pulled together, and you're the juice is flowing. The juice is flowing from the power of the spirit of the ceremony, and from the spirit of the actual object as well. So with a purba, as I say, it's a very complex ceremony generally, but you could also do it very simply. If I was empowering a small purba amulet, okay, so I've got a purba amulet around my neck. Let's pull this one out. If I bring it close, you can maybe see it. There's a little purba. And so it's traditional, if you work with the purba, that you carry a purba with you at all time, and so a little amulet like this is a good way of doing it. So if I was going to empower this, I would invoke the spirit of the purba. I would invoke the spirit of Dorji Purba and kind of become Dorji Purba, and then I would use my breath to blow upon the purba, and at the same time probably, well, I'd almost definitely be saying a mantra, which would be the mantra of Dorji Purba. So, Om Bendra Kile Kalaya Soha Binam Bam Humpe. And because I am embodying the actual kind of spirit of Dorji Purba in the practice, because I've had all the empowerments and all of that kind of stuff, then it's kind of not me that's blowing out. It's Dorji Purba that is blowing out. this is and therefore Dorji Purba's breath empowers the small purba. This is a form of breath empowerment, and it's really common. It's really common all over the world. You find it in the Americas, you find it in Northern Asia, and in lots and lots of places, because you are empowering. You know, when in our culture, we might be gambling with dice or playing a game with dice, and we'll pick up the dice and we're shaking them, and then we'll blow on them and throw them. That's the same thing. That's a kind of echo of it. It's like that whole way of putting our spirit into the object. So you could work with a rattle, you know, it's like there's your rattle, and it's a brand new rattle, you've just made it, or you've just bought it from the local bing bong shop, and you blow onto it, so you're putting yourself into it. That's one little way of forming an empowerment and a link. You know, it used to be traditional in some northern Asian, Siberian traditions that when a shaman died, their last breath would be caught in a piece of fur, and that piece of fur would then be kind of become part of the regalia of another shaman, or a sacred object that the tribal group kept. Breath is important. Breath is a really important sacred connector. So you see this use of the breath used a great deal. You can breathe all sorts of things alive and awake in that way. It's done with focus. If you are working in a shamanic way, or if you're working in a Buddhist way where you embody the spirit. In Tibetan Buddhism, you don't embody the spirit in quite the same way as a shaman will, where they're possessed, but you visualize yourself. It's a sort of controlled possession in that way. You visualize yourself as the sacred being, and then, like I was just demonstrating with the Pura amulet, and then you breathing out in that way. But if you're working in a shamanic way properly, and the spirit is embodying you, then it's not you that's breathing out, it's the spirit. And so you get this used in healing too, and not just breath. You'll get shamans spitting on people, because the spit becomes sacred, because it's imbued with the power of the spirit that is embodying the shaman. So you can use it in healing work, and you can use it for empowerment work. All of these things, I'm just giving you a very basics, of course. I mean, the actual, teachings regarding them and whatever, you need to kind of go into properly and work in, in a proper way and learn them. I'm just giving you a kind of a potted view of it. The same can be done with liquids, of course. In Mongolia and Siberia, vodka is often used. So you take in a mouthful of vodka, and you are the spirit. The spirit is inside you, so the spirit empowers that vodka. I'll pick up my purba again, and if this was let's say it was a drum beater or whatever, it doesn't really matter, just some form of ritual object, then with the mouthful of vodka you blow all over the object, probably on all of the different sides of the object, because then that's the spirit inside you blowing that empowered liquid. In South America, they do this with perfume. It's the same principle. It's exactly the same principle. And those are traditions that I don't know a great deal about, because they're not my traditions. But Aqua Florida, I think. I'm not sure what it is, but they use that. And as I say, perfumes as well. I prefer vodka. Vodka's much nicer. And I do use vodka in that way sometimes to bless and awaken objects. But water is also fine, and just the breath is also fine. And again, like if it was a Tibetan, a Himalayan, or an Indian practice that you were blessing, you would know presumably the appropriate mantra. Mantra is there's a lot of misconceptions about mantras. Mantras are kind of like magic spells. They are a frequency or a note in the cosmos that has a resonance with a particular oh God, I'm going to sound so new age here, with a particular vibration. Sorry. So it's like when you are reciting a mantra, you are tuning into that vibration, and the vibration of the mantra is generally the vibration of a spirit being. So, for instance, Dorji Purba, Vajrakalaya, the spirit of the Purba, his mantra connects you with his spirit essence. And therefore, when you say a mantra that is connected to the spirit essence of the spirit that the object is connected to, you're kind of putting this energetic field around the object and inside the object that is also helping to empower it. And the same with a mantra that you say. So, for instance, every day for, well, I wouldn't say every day, but almost every day for the last 30 odd years, I've said the mantra for Padmasambhava, because that's a main figure for me that I work with. And so, Om Ahung Bensra Guru Pema Siddhi Hung, and I would say it at least 108 times using prayer bead mala, going round the mala each time saying it. So that has the same principle as when you're saying or blowing a mantra into an object. That is about me becoming the same vibration, in inverted commas, as Padmasambhava. It's tuning my dumb two-legged self to become the same vibrational quality as Padmasambhava. And so you're supposed to sort of do this as a way of attuning yourself to, to use the Tibetan term, to the yidam. The yidam is the being that you are identifying with. And I've done the same with the Purba mantra too. I generally say to people that you should say a mantra at least 100,000 times. That's the kind of beginning level. And that then helps you kind of connect with it in terms of being able to do the practice and work with the object in a good way. But of course, that's Tibetan. I'm going to put it down again now. That's the Tibetan way. It's not necessarily sort of like the Native American way, or even the sort of the Siberian or Mongolian shamanic way, because every tradition has different ways of doing it. So you've sprayed or you've breathed on your ritual object. That's one way of doing it, and many objects, they like this to kind of happen many times, and you're kind of then feeding the object. Objects, if you think of an object as a living being, that needs to be fed. We all like food. Food's good stuff. And ritual objects are just the same. So different objects will require different amounts of food, different qualities of food. In some Native American traditions, they use corn flour and pollen. I'm thinking more in the southwest here with tribal groups from the Pueblos and things like that. They will bless and awaken and feed ritual objects with pollen, corn pollen often, and that is the sort of the tradition. And the objects, because they're part of that tradition and they have that group soul, that's what they expect. It's like that is the deal that humans and the objects have made over the centuries. Objects know they're going to get fed, and they're going to get fed with corn pollen. And so that's the sort of, as I say, it's the deal, it's the covenant that has been made between the objects, or the spirit of the objects, and the people. But of course, not every culture will use corn pollen. Vodka is very often used. In Mongolia and sort of southern Siberia, vodka will be fed to objects, as will black tea, milk, blood, and that is the sort of the tradition. And the objects, because they're part of that tradition and they have that group soul, that's what they expect. It's like that is the deal that humans and the objects have made over the centuries. Objects know they're going to get fed, and they're going to get fed with corn pollen. And so that's the sort of, as I say, it's the deal, it's the covenant that has been made between the objects, or the spirit of the objects, and the people. But of course, not every culture will use vodka. In Mongolia and sort of southern Siberia, vodka will be fed to objects, as will black tea, milk, human or animal, generally animal. Um, Other things like there's a liquid called arsan, which is a kind of sacred herbal tea, I think is a good way of putting it, that is brewed up using different herbs. And as it's being brewed, it's being sung to, and prayers are being put into it, and it becomes empowered in that way. And then that is used to empower objects, and it's used in healing too. People will wash with it and perhaps flick it around their local space, as it were, to clean it. It's a bit like a kind of liquid smudge. And of course, smudge itself and incense is another way of feeding objects. All of these things help you bond with the object because you are partaking in a ritual act which you do on a regular basis, so that you are automatically bonding. I mean, there's no other word for it. It's like you're entering into a relationship with these ritual objects, and also the objects become more empowered, more enlivened, and more powerful because of the fact that you're feeding them. As I say, an object is a sacred living being. Yeah, I'm kind of looking at the screen and seeing what I wrote too as kind of notes, and I'm reminded of a piece of Buryat Mongol textile shamanic costume bit that came. It was Mahabasha. It was like a cap with the fringe, and there's the tails down the back, and it was an old piece, and it was absolutely rank. It had been given lots and lots of milk offerings, and it smelt like a cheese factory that had gone nuclear. It was horrible. I had to hang it up outside for a few days in fresh air before it was kind of, I wanted to bring it into the house. It was really, really yuck. So there are problems with making an offering, especially with milk. The smell of rancid milk offerings on bits of southern Siberian ritual clothing and whatever, it can be, yeah, black tea's less smelly. So, but that's part of the tradition. I mean, in Mongolia too, they will get a small bowl of milk and they will throw it over their altar at times. Every culture's got a different way of doing it. Milk is very important as a ritual object, a ritual offering rather, in Mongolia, because it's a food, and foods are often used because foods are precious, because they're kind of they give life to us, and therefore they give life to other beings, and because they're important to us giving them away is a kind of act of generosity, and it kind of is a big thing. It would be like us going down to the local supermarket and making an offering of pizzas on our altar. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just obsessed with pizzas. Whatever. Blood is quite a regular one too. Shaman's mirrors. I haven't got a shaman's mirror in here, but shaman's mirror is traditionally they're blooded every not every tradition will do that, and not every mirror will be blooded, but that's very often part of the historic attitude with shaman's mirrors. The bronze shaman's mirrors, they would be washed in the blood of a sacrificed animal, probably a reindeer or something similar to that. I don't do that personally, but I do use vodka as a substitute. The Tibetans have got a wonderful knack of substituting flesh and blood. Tibet used to do a lot of sacrificing, and then the Buddhists came in, and the Buddhists kind of said, "Oh, you can't do that." So it got outlawed in Tibet. So the Tibetans do substitutes. They do substitute blood, which is a red liquid generally. I'm trying to remember the name for it and I can't. Yeah, no, it's gone. But it's a red liquid. It's kind of like it's a red powder you put into water and it turns it red. So that becomes a substitute blood. And you can use red wine too. Red wine can be used as a substitute blood. And they make what are called torma cakes, which are made from dough. And these represent meat in different ways. Some of them are very elaborate, and some of them are left kind of white, which would be peaceful, and some of them are coloured red, which represents sort of meat more, and they're more for wrathful practices. So you can substitute things. In Mongolia, they don't tend to substitute things in that way if it's a shamanic tradition. I remember being in the deserts of Western Mongolia, and there was a great pile of bits of sheep in a bowl, and sometimes all the bits of the animal are kind of arranged in specific ways on altars. But the Buddhists who used to do that in Tibet, they now make the torma cakes, which are generally made from dough. Sometimes you can get them made of clay and things like that, and they're more permanent, but that's a whole other subject in itself. Smoke, then, going back to smoke, I'm just scrolling my screen here and looking at what I wrote. Yeah, I remember working with a Mayan shaman once, and he was using cigars. He was blessing a drum, and he used cigars and arranged it so that the cigar smoke was going into the drum, and that was a way of feeding the drum. These spirits need to be fed in different ways, and that's also, as I said, it's also part of the whole way that you're connecting. You are giving, and therefore the object gives back. It's reciprocity. Yeah. And I've got a pair of horbo, the Mongolian Buryat Mongol horse staffs, which I wrote about in a recent book, The Horses and Dragons. And you work with these by feeding them. They always have a bowl of water by the side of them on my altar, and then from time to time they will be picked up and given water to drink by putting their mouths into the water and allowing them to drink. You treat them like real horses, and I will also smoke them with incense each day, and I touch them, kind of, run my hand over their heads, as it were, so that you again, it's all part of the bonding. So keeping the kind of the dialogue with the ritual objects is incredibly important. And of course, water is again a universal thing. I mean, you can think of holy water in a Christian church, which is just empowered water. And lots of different cultures will do exactly the same with water in different ways. You can use a shaman's mirror to empower water. You can pick up the purba again. You can use the purba to empower water. It's like you've got a bowl of water here, and you will tap the bowl of water on each of the four sides, and maybe put the purba blade into it and circle it around, and you may blow onto the water too with the mantra, and all of that, saying prayers and connecting in a sacred way with that, is then empowering the water. And then you give the water to some poor unfortunate person that is feeling a little bit poorly, and they drink the water, and that's it. That's the miracle cure. In Iran, which is so badly being bombed at the moment by some orange person in the White House, they have a tradition of ritual bowls, which are often called divination bowls, and they're bronze or silver bowls, and they have, in effect, magic spells written all the way around the outside of them, and sometimes on the inside of them too. And the whole quality of the bowl is designed to bless and empower water. So water is poured into the bowl, and all of the words, the sacred words are really important. all of those sacred words empower the water, and then people drink the water in the same way that I was just describing with the purba. It's entirely universal. We're just dumb two-leggeds, and dumb two-leggeds the world over do the same kind of things. Mongolians use sound too. They use a jaw harp sometimes called a kur, and they're kind of putting that and singing, or making the jaw harp sing, and that empowers objects. And often the jaw harps will have sort of dangly strings of fabric and whatever attached to them too. So as the person is playing, they're inviting the spirits. This finger moving is when you're flicking the little bit of the tongue, I think it's called, on a jaw harp, and you're beckoning the spirits, and then the spirits go down all this sort of fabric stuff. And if the fabric stuff is kind of dumped on a sick person or whatever, or a ritual object too, then the spirits are coming down through the fabric, and they're kind of going into the person or the object. So you can empower objects in that way. I often empower when I'm making on-god dolls. So, okay, an on-god is the Mongolian word for a spirit helper, but it's a bit bigger than a spirit helper. So maybe I'm making an ancestral doll of some sort. I will then call to the ancestor using the kur, using the jaw harp, and I will then invite the ancestral spirit through the jaw harp down the fabric, bits of rope and string and cloth and whatever, the tassels, the ribbons, and that then is dangled onto the doll, and that's a way of bringing the doll alive. And then when I put the doll on the altar, I will, depending on what the doll is, what the spirit is, it will be fed. There will be food put in front of it. Okay, one of my ancestor spirits is my 9th generation grandfather, who was a blacksmith, and he, or his spirit, told me that he likes apples. So there is permanently an apple on my altar, on a small little offering dish, and this apple is in front of this cloth and leather spirit doll of my 9th generation blacksmith ancestor, and then every sort of week or two I will replace the apple with a fresh one, and then I will eat the apple I've just taken off, because that's a gift of a piece of empowered, blessed food that I eat. You don't just like throw it away, you do something with it. Same with water. I wouldn't drink water that was on my altar, but you don't just tip it away. I will generally use old water that's on my altar as food for the spirits, to water plants, because it's enlivened, it's empowered, it's ritualized. You don't just kind of throw it out the window, as it were. It needs respect. Say something about the center of the world. Center of the world, not in the middle of the earth where it's a little bit hot and kind of sticky down there, but the center of creation. When you're working in a sacred way, you step into the center point of the cosmos. And that's the center point of all of the directions. So you've got the north and the south and the east and the west, and the four winds around you, and you've got the sky above and the earth below. So we're surrounded by these 6 directions, and we are always in the sacred center. And there's a whole load of different teachings about this from different cultures. For instance, with the elements in Tibetan traditions, you have the element of space or void or emptiness in the center, because in Buddhist teachings everything emerges out of emptiness and then dissolves back into emptiness again. So the center point is the powerhouse. I always like the idea that comes from Native American traditions about the center being kind of like where the duality, the yin and yang and up and down and hot and cold and male and female and black and white and all of the opposites are. And for me, they're like the terminals on a battery. You know, you rig up a battery, but if you only rig up one terminal, nothing will work. So you've got to connect both terminals. And so the center point in the medicine wheel teachings that I've been taught, that is the center point. It is the great cosmic battery. So when you are in the center and you deliberately step into the center and you're facing each of the 6 directions or the 10 directions, which are the 8 around you, the, you know, north, northwest, west. I'm going anti-clockwise there, but you know what I'm saying. Those 8 directions and the above and the below, they're the 10 directions. So you deliberately kind of create the construct or the idea that you are standing in the very center of everything, and then you're connected to things. So again, picking up the Purba, you can empower objects by offering them. And this also comes from a Native American tradition, which is something that I do subscribe to. You never own an object. The object works with you, but they have their own life. So one day they may be passed on to somebody else, or they may well outlive you. I mean, this Purba will outlive me and was there before I was born. So objects don't belong to you, you're just the custodian. And so in some traditions that I've learned, some Native American traditions, a medicine object, say a rattle or whatever is, you are offering it to spirit. So you offer it to each of the directions, and you will make a prayer, and you will ask for good connection with the object while you're working with it, and that it benefits beings, or whatever words you want to use. But you face each of the directions in turn and, you know, make that offering. So that's another way of connecting with the ritual. And you kind of get the same idea working with the sacred pipe. You know, you face each of the directions with the sacred pipe. I'm a pipe carrier in that I was taught sacred pipe by Lakota teachers a long time ago, long time ago, and I do regular pipe ceremonies. So with the pipe, you very much go to the center of the world, and you're praying from that center point, because you're offering smoke to the directions all around you, and you're inviting in those directional powers. And when you invite in the directional powers, the spirits of each of the directions, then you are automatically placing yourself and stepping yourself into the very center of creation. And from that center point, where it's the place of emergence, the place where in the Buddhist tradition emptiness becomes form, and in the Native American tradition where the yin and yang of creation are connected, then you've got that power. So you're in the very sacred heart of everything, and from that place of power, that place of being in the center of everything, you can then do the magic that you're trying to do. You have to be centered, literally. It's literally and metaphorically, you know, an important thing. So with a pipe, for instance, another thing with smoke there, if I was blessing and awakening somebody else's pipe, I would use the smoke and the little embers that shoot out of the end to bless and awaken that other person's pipe. I would blow smoke over their pipe and make prayers, and I might use a feather to kind of call in the powers holding the feather and circling and kind of going up and going down, and then banging the pipe, banging the feather on the pipe so that it's part of bringing in the spirits and bringing in the blessings. There's so many different ways of doing things. If you're part of a proper tradition and you have been taught the way that it is done, then you need to do it that way. And if you're not part of a proper tradition and you're kind of trying to find a way to do things, then look at the kind of archetypes that I've shared, some of them here, you know, like using liquid, using words, offering it to the directions, using smoke, whatever. You're working with it in that way. And another really important thing is intent. Your intent is really important, because if you're engaged with it and your intent is there, then the spirits are going to hear you. And so if they hear you, they're going to kind of come around a little bit better. Yeah, it's making it real. So that's just a few examples and a little bit of instruction about blessing and awakening objects. And I think it's really important to put that out there, because, like I say, it's not something that is often talked about, but it's really kind of crucial if you're going to work with something in a connected, joined up way and in a powerful way. You can't just kind of grab something off the shelf and run with it. It's got to be bonded to you. It's got to be alive. It's got to be awake. Because that's the way it is. And of course, there's a whole other subject here. Sometimes ritual objects are very powerful because they're awake, and sometimes that can be harmful. I remember when a friend of mine died that had a lot of traditional wooden Siberian carved spirit fetishes, basically, on gods, whatever. It was a different name from the tradition that she was working with, but she had a lot of these, and she had been taught and trained and knew how to work with them properly from traditional elders. But then she died, and part of the way of working with these objects was that they had to be fed. And I remember a few of us, I wasn't around, this happened in another country where my friend lived, but a few of us were gathering around trying to find somebody that actually knew the practice so that they could go and feed these spirits. Because if the spirits got hungry, then all sorts of merry hell may happen. You know, these spirits can be quite powerful and quite ornery, so these dolls, these wooden fetishes, needed to be fed, needed to be managed, needed to be looked after. And if the original custodian wasn't there because she'd died, somebody else had to do it. And I can't remember the exact outcome of that. I know we found somebody, and then I think that the ritual objects were actually then sent back to the people in Siberia to be looked after properly, because that was where they'd come from. So you have to be aware of those sorts of things. I've heard many Native American teachings about different bundles, different wrapped up collection of ritual objects which were kind of dangerous, and so great care had to be done. You know, if people disrespected them or didn't follow the instructions of looking after them. And you get the same sort of thing in Tibetan traditions too, and well, in all traditions, this is part of it. So if you've got a ritual object that you're working with, you have to think about how you might dispose of it. My place is like a museum. I mean, it's not a museum because everything is used, but I got so many different bits and pieces up in my shrine room. And you know, sometimes my partner will say, I'm not touching it, I'm not going anywhere near it. You know, it's like you've got to sort out who's gonna discharge the or dismantle the bomb, as it were. So that's something to think about. You know, maybe if you've just got a drum or a rattle or whatever, then it's not going to be that big a deal. But if you've got a lot of real heavyweight objects, you have to think about how you're going to get rid of them, or how you're going to kind of pass them on in some way. Yeah, it can be a problem. I've got one particular object that nobody else is allowed to touch because it's connected to a particular mountain spirit that in Mongolia, and it came to me in an accidental way, and it's really dangerous. This spirit is well known in Mongolia to kill people, so you have to be very careful with it. I don't let anybody touch that. I haven't worked out quite what I'm supposed to do with it yet. But I'm going to live forever, so it's not an issue for me. You know, it'll be fine. So I think that's probably enough. I think I've rambled more than enough. Yeah, this is the first attempt at me doing a kind of video ramble in this way, and I'll try and do more, but I'm not going to promise because I get busy. I'm just going to do a call out about Sacred Hoop magazine, www.sacredhoop.org, best shamanic magazine on the planet, and I've got my audio podcast, which maybe this will go on to as well, I'm not sure yet. And if you're on Facebook, come and join my Three Worlds Shamanism Facebook group, because it's very active and very friendly and got lots of knowledgeable people, so it's a great place to ask questions and learn. And even if you just lurk and look at other people's questions, you'll get a lot of stuff from it. It's a good group. And anything else I need to say? Oh, my email address. I can't always promise to reply. I get so many emails, but I'll do my best. nick@sacredhoop.org. Thank you for watching. Bye.